Welcome to Danis Podcast, where today we're taking you through one of the world's most devastating and transformative events, World War I. Now, World War I was massive, bloody, and complex. It's also where a lot of our modern politics, conflicts, and even borders began. So, whether you're on a lunch break or just unwinding, grab a seat and let's go back to 1914. World War I didn't just spring up out of nowhere. Imagine Europe as a complicated web of alliances, deep rivalries, and intense pride, like a neighborhood where everyone's suspicious of each other but tries to keep the peace, until something small blows up. And that blow-up came on June 28, 1914, when Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary was assassinated in Sarajevo by a Serbian nationalist. To Austria-Hungary, this wasn't just a murder, it was a direct challenge. They declared war on Serbia, hoping to make a quick point. But, surprise, Serbia had Russia in its corner. Russia stepped in, Germany saw it as a threat and declared war on Russia, and just like that, the entire continent started spiraling into conflict. Within weeks, we had two massive alliances clashing. On one side were the Central Powers, mainly Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria. Opposing them were the Allies, the UK, France, Russia, and later on, countries like Italy and the US joined too. Imagine a giant tug of war, with both sides pulling as hard as they could. But instead of a rope, it's countries pulling for survival, pride, and control. Now, World War I wasn't just about soldiers with rifles on open battlefields. For the first time, war became industrial. Machine guns, tanks, airplanes, chemical weapons, and heavy artillery, all of these new technologies were used on a massive scale, and it changed the rules. Soldiers dug deep trenches, where they spent months under bombardment, facing horrible conditions. Life in the trenches was brutal: mud, rats, and constant fear of attack. And it wasn't just combat, it was psychological warfare. Imagine being 18 or 20, sitting in a trench with shells exploding all around you, cold, wet, hungry, and just praying to survive the next day. It's beyond what anyone should endure. This war was long, lasting from 1914 to 1918. Battles like Verdun and the Somme were literal meat grinders, with millions of soldiers fighting and dying for months over a few miles of land. At Verdun, for example, there were almost 1 million casualties. Just picture a football stadium packed full of people, and now imagine every single one of them dead or wounded. That was just one battle in this war. Overall, it's estimated that over 10 million soldiers died and around 20 million were wounded. And it wasn't just the military, civilians were caught in the crossfire too, with around 7 million civilians killed. Entire towns and cities were turned into rubble. But why did this war last so long and cost so many lives? Part of it was because of the alliances and strategies in place. Both sides were equally matched, and every time one side seemed to gain a little ground, the other would push back. Each country kept pushing, thinking a breakthrough was just one more battle away. But breakthroughs rarely happened, and when they did, it was usually at the cost of tens of thousands of lives. So, how did it end? By 1918, both sides were exhausted. The Allies, helped massively by fresh American troops and resources, finally managed to break through German defenses. Germany, facing rebellion at home, economic collapse, and no realistic chance of winning, agreed to an armistice on November 11, 1918. The world celebrated, thinking peace had finally come. Now, who won and lost? Officially, the Allies were the victors, and the Central Powers were the losers. But what followed wasn't exactly a win. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, put the blame for the entire war on Germany. They were forced to pay massive reparations, give up territories, and cut down their military. And this treaty left Germany humiliated and economically crippled. People were starving, inflation was through the roof, and the resentment built up. Germany felt they'd been treated unjustly, and this anger brewed for years, eventually paving the way for someone like Adolf Hitler to take control with promises to restore Germany's honor. Now, what happened after World War I to prevent another conflict? People realized that the devastation of World War I couldn't happen again. The League of Nations was created as the world's first attempt at a global organization to settle disputes and promote peace. The idea was that if countries could talk things out before they reached for their guns, another world war might be avoided. But, well, the League didn't work as planned. It didn't have the power or authority to stop aggressive countries. And, unfortunately, it wasn't enough to keep the peace. But not all of World War I's impact was negative. New medical practices were developed, like X-rays for shrapnel wounds and improved surgery techniques. Women entered the workforce in greater numbers, with many countries granting them the right to vote. The war changed social structures, politics, and international relations permanently. It was a global wake-up call about the consequences of unchecked militarism and nationalism. And that's where we leave off today. World War I reshaped the world, but it also left deep wounds that would fester and grow. Tomorrow, we'll dive into World War II, a conflict directly fueled by the aftermath of World War I and one that pushed humanity to the brink once again. Thanks for tuning in.